Here we have verse 4 of the 13th chapter of the Gospel of John. We have Jesus at the setting of the supper that he's having with his disciples. It's been disputed whether this is actually the Last Supper or not. We'll leave that conversation aside, but certainly there's some significant description of the scene that is unfolding here and the events that take place. And of course, everything that's been mentioned by John up until this point, the first three verses, are really anticipating what begins to unfold here, this rather surprising display of humility on the part of Christ, which obviously becomes an example he sets, hoping that they're going to pick up the point, and begin to realize that the contest they should be having among themselves is not who's greatest, but who is able to take to himself the most dramatic expression of being a servant, and that's the idea here. So we have ageirotai. This is from ageiro, means I rise up. It's the word that's used for rising from the dead. In this case, it's the third person singular. Present passive indicative, so the passive voice or the middle voice, either one here, suggesting he raised himself up. And so it's the idea he rose up, and then rising up, ek preposition takes the genitive ek to, the genitive neuter, singular article, so ek, out of the, and then dapnu, the word for dinner or supper, usually the major meal of the day. This again is the genitive singular of this neuter noun. And so he raises himself up out of the dinner, implying during dinner, in other words, in the very midst of dinner, from dinner, we might say. Kai, the connective tithesen, this is from tithemi, to place or to put. This is the third person singular, present active indicative, present tense here. So he rises up, that's present as well, and puts aside is the idea, puts aside ta, the neuter, plural article, puts aside the himatia, the garments, common word in the New Testament for garments. So he puts aside the garments, referring to his own garments, and then labon, from labano, I take, or I receive. This is the aorist participle. So this is the aorist active participle, masculine, singular, nominative, referring back to the subject of the sentence, who is Christ himself. And so the garments, and having taken is the idea. Lention, this is usually translated a towel. It's based on a word that means a linen cloth of some kind here, and so he takes this. And diadzusen, this is from diadzonumi, a me verb in the New Testament. This is the third person singular, aorist active indicative. It means to gird oneself around, the prefix from dia, and then the rest of the word has to do with wrapping something. So he wraps himself around is the idea. Girding himself, the reflexive pronoun here in the accusative singular masculine, himself. So rising up from dinner, presumably in the midst of dinner, somewhat surprising, I suppose, to the disciples who are observing this. He takes off his normal outer garments and wraps himself in what amounts to the clothing that would be normally worn by a slave or a servant. Of course, this is going to be the anticipation of the next events that will take place with the washing of their feet.